Hey Grant, when you look at this battle between Clemson and Bama, of course, third time for the national championship, fourth time in the college football playoff consecutively. It's become just a different dynamic each year. Of course, there was the Deshaun Watson factor that kind of overrode everything else in regards to him almost single-handedly winning the first game and then winning the second game with two late drives after Alabama went up 14-0. And then last year's game was a completely different game with two running quarterbacks and not a lot of explosiveness on either side, and the Alabama defense really being able to focus on the ground game with no threat downfield. Your thoughts about obviously Tua, Trevor Lawrence? They both bring a different dynamic to each program, each offense. Trevor seems to have maybe a little bit more pressure on him. Would you agree with that? A little bit more on his shoulders?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just because he's a true freshman, first time on the big stage. Tua, although it was only a half last year, played in the national championship against Georgia. But I really don't expect this game to come down to the quarterback play. I think both quarterbacks are going to play tremendous. I think really the key is going to be how their pieces around him and how their performing cast performs.
Going along the same lines, are you a bit surprised that Trevor Lawrence has turned out to be this good just because you've had a few other five stars go through in the last few years? And not that they didn't perform, but they just didn't get the chance and obviously didn't make it happen in camp to get the job. But Trevor Lawrence has turned out to be everything advertised.
I wouldn't say I'm surprised just because ever since he got on campus, he felt a little bit different than all those other guys. But I'm certainly a little surprised that he's been so successful at such an early stage in his career.
Got Grant Matheny and Jason Priester on the line from Shaking the Southland, breaking down the Clemson side of the huge matchup against Alabama for another national championship. It would be Clemson's second under Dabo Swinney. And, of course, Nick Saban going for about his 48th or something like that. I think it's 7 that would pass Bear Bryant. I think this program would be one of the few. I could put Georgia in the same category just because of the two games that have been played in the last year where they've played Alabama toe-to-toe with no success in the final result, but a lot of success in terms of just matching up, where this seems to be one of the few teams that the Bama mystique has been torn away, Jason, and there's the athletes have to know, hey, we can match up, we can play with these guys.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I kind of look at it as Alabama and Clemson 1A and 1B. I think Georgia's right there. They're right on the brink. I think Georgia's going to be really good next year, but I don't think there's any question the Clemson athletes know they can compete. They've been on the stage, they've done it. They've beat them one time before. It's just a matter of executing. If they execute, they can win the game.
And that was one of the big turning points in the championship win in 2016, where Bama punched you in the mouth. You were down 14-0. Deshaun Watson had no space. The receivers couldn't separate. The Bama running game was taking charge of the game. And then Deshaun Watson, it seemed, I likened it once I saw Oklahoma start to gain some yardage and score points in the second half. Now, obviously, they couldn't complete the deal. They didn't have the defense that Clemson did, but they took the punch, and they took a huge punch in the mouth. But they started to get Bama gassed on defense, and even though they've got great personnel on defense, the same thing happened a few years ago against you guys, where they were just gassed, and the tempo of the offense, Grant, the play of the wide receivers out fighting and out high pointing defensive backs for the football. Just Clemson played a near perfect game in the second half on offense to pull off the upset.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Even if you look at this year's offense, the wide receivers are really good. Travis Etienne has had a really, really good season. I expect him to have another big game. So it's certainly possible to expose this Alabama defense because they haven't really been as good as they've been in the past. So I definitely think it's possible for Clemson to have a really good game on offense.
So how good is the offensive line to be able to allow the guys, we talk wide receivers and running backs and quarterbacks and the guys that put up the glitzy numbers, but the guys in the trenches make it all work?
Yeah, it worries me a little bit because Alabama is just so strong and so deep on the defensive line. Quinnen Williams kind of really scares me a lot. He can really wreck the game. If the offensive line fails to block him, I think it could be a long night.
Hey, Jason, on the other side of the ball, there's a thought process that even though Alabama has arguably the best offensive line in the country, it seems to be something that we repeat every year, that they've got the best of this and the best of that. But the offensive line right there with Oklahoma and some others, as good as any in the nation. That the Clemson defensive line is just so overwhelmingly, from a sheer talent standpoint, this might be the best defensive line we've ever seen in college football, certainly in the last decade or two, that maybe you just let those guys go and you can shore up some mistakes in the back end by just allowing those four, whoever in the game, to go at it.
Oh, I think that's one of the keys. I think the front four have to get pressure. They have to harass Tua. If you let him sit in that pocket, he's going to pick you apart. They need to do it with the front four. Don't bring a lot of pressure. Start blitzing a lot. The middle of the field will be open, and we've all seen that can be a weakness for Clemson. You got to get the pressure. You got to bring it with the front four. If you don't bring the pressure with just the front four, maybe five, it might be a long night.
South Carolina threw for 100 zillion yards and scored a bunch of points and stayed within the game. And if they had converted a couple fourth downs right inside the 5-yard line, it might have been really scary there at the end. And there's been Kellen Mond's second half for Texas A&M. But I don't know that there's a defense in the country, just the way the game's played now and the skill position players are so good that you can just hold down everybody all the time. So both of you, your thoughts about the secondary, because I see both. It's obviously very talented, very gifted. Is it getting better? Is it shoring up mistakes? Are the coverage, is the storyline of the coverage issues overblown? I'll start with you, Grant.
I think they're a little overblown just because they really just had two terrible games that they almost lost because of the secondary, really, the South Carolina and Texas A&M game. But you look at last week's game against Notre Dame, the secondary played fantastic. Now, given Notre Dame doesn't have the playmakers that Alabama will bring to the table, but I think that it's certainly overblown a little bit. I think this secondary is definitely capable of playing and stopping Alabama.
I agree. It's overblown a little bit. I think the issues have been with the safeties more so than the corners. I think Notre Dame tried to run that same post play South Carolina gave them so many fits with early in that game 3 times in the Cotton Bowl, and they shut it down. And I think it's a little overblown, but I think this is another game where the slot guy can give Clemson problems matching up on the safeties. I'm interested to see who's going to be on the slot guy when they kick it off.
So I'm going to toss this out as well to both of you, Grant, and to Jason, in regards to special teams. That's a bugaboo for Alabama, is missing field goals. Not necessarily this year. It's been a little bit better with their current place kicker. It's been something that you guys have. Hugel has had the job for quite some time, but he's not anywhere close to being the best out there. And just the overall special teams, it's a bit mind-blowing that programs at this level, that would be the one place that they both struggle. So I'll let you guys speak to Clemson's special teams play, starting with you, Grant.
Yeah, I think even if you look at the national championship last year, Alabama almost lost because of a couple missed field goals. Clemson's not much better, but I do think they still have a little bit of advantage on special teams in terms of kicking.
Yeah, our special teams historically under Dabo haven't been very good. The last couple of years they've been better. Kind of falling off a little bit this year. We got lucky that the Darion Kendrick's fumble went out of bounds in the first quarter of the Cotton Bowl. That could have been a big turning point in that game. But outside of 40, Greg Hugel worries me. Our punting is horrendous. If it comes down to a field position battle, we're going to be in trouble because our punting is terrible. But our coverage has been better.
And you wonder how that happens at a place like Clemson, where maybe the kid's that good in practice and he just can't transfer it to the field, or whether they just can't find a punter, or whatever the issue was there. It's obviously an important part of the game that gets lost in terms of yardage totals, but it's certainly hidden yardage where, man, you see it every week. A kid that can keep an opposing offense inside the 5 or 10 yard line, it's huge.
From my understanding, that's exactly what this is. Our punter, Will Spires, he's great during practice. He booms them. But something happens when he's out there on the field during the game, and it doesn't translate. I think we got the #1 punter in the country coming in next year.
Talking Clemson, Alabama on the Tigers side from Shaking the Southland with Grant Matheny. We also have Jason Priester on the line. So we can talk about the matchups, and we could rate each position and come out with some kind of formula as to who's the better team. But sometimes there's just some hidden ingredients, or you just don't match up well against somebody. Maybe that's been Syracuse the last 2 years. Based on the results, it would appear to be that way. Even if you're a lot better, or if you're not quite as good, you've got a good matchup against somebody else and give them trouble. So there's always those kind of hidden ingredients. And so Grant, do you have a good feel about this game? You know, if you measured the talent, you can give me your analysis of that, whether you think it's just dead even or almost close to it, but you've got a better feeling than you should, or maybe a not as good a feeling as you should.
I feel pretty good about the game, honestly. I think Bama might be a little bit more talented in terms of pure talent, but I think Clemson's good enough to hang around in the game, and we all know in college football, if you can hang around in the game, you're good enough to win.
And Grant, that's an interesting point you bring up, because after hearing Brian Kelly's comments after the playoff game, that he didn't want to dismiss his team in regards to talent, and didn't liken the outcome to them being blown away by Alabama in 2012, even though the score was similar. Him mentioning that he thought his talent was near Clemson. He didn't necessarily say as good, but he factored in a lot of coaching decisions, and they didn't play that well and that sort of thing. And I thought there was maybe some relevance to that, but not nearly as much. I think that there's still a talent gap. And then I went to the recruiting rankings, which obviously tell us a lot. Who are the top 25 in recruiting? Well, except for some exceptions like Michigan State and Wisconsin, who play over their heads all the time because they're just great at talent development, Stanford, and then Texas being the underwhelming team up until this year that never meets its recruiting rankings. Basically, who out recruits everyone? Well, it's Alabama, then it's Ohio State, and now Georgia, and who's constantly in the top 5. And so Clemson, I looked at Clemson, I looked at Notre Dame, and basically their recruiting classes are between about 5 and 15 the last 5 years. They were almost identical. They weren't Ohio State, Alabama up to the top. Obviously, the player development has been pretty exceptional, Grant.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, Brian Kelly's going to say that about the game, and I get where he's coming from. A couple big plays by Clemson in the receiving core for them. Justin Ross had a bunch of big plays. Also, Notre Dame lost Julian Love, their best cover corner. So I think that did kind of affect how Trevor Lawrence was able to throw the ball around. But I think he kind of had a good point, honestly. 30-3. The score might not have shown how close it was, but the first and second quarter, until Clemson really blew it up, was a little bit closer than I would have expected.
And that seemed to be the difference. Was I did a halftime analysis and sat here and had a bunch of people chime in on a live chat, is that if you graded like every single play of the first half, I don't know that Notre Dame didn't win more plays than Clemson, but they won like the 5-yard plays and the 1-yard loss plays. And Clemson had the athletes, Justin Ross in particular, but other guys that just made, and on the defensive front, that made the drive killing plays or the drive changing plays for touchdowns that were the explosive plays that Notre Dame couldn't make. Jason, I don't know what your take is on that.
I think Brian Kelly was more getting to the point that they're not near as far away as they were when they played Alabama several years ago and got beat pretty badly. The score might look similar, but he feels better about where the program is today compared to where he did back then. They don't have near as far to go now as they did then.
Yeah, to Grant's point, this was a game till about 5-6 minutes left in the first half. Then it got away. That game against Alabama, it was like the first 3 plays of the game. You could tell they had gaps in the offensive line this wide for backs to run through and could do anything they wanted in the passing game, and it was just going to be a circus from there. But going back to the recruiting rankings, can you guys speak to what this program has done? They should have really good teams based on the recruiting rankings, but they shouldn't be the best team in college football or the second best team in college football. They've been surpassed by Ohio State on a regular basis in terms of recruiting, Georgia in the last few years, and even like the likes of USC and others, they've recruited extremely well. Obviously, they're loaded with talent, but they've superseded that.
I think it's a lot to do with the culture, and I can't explain how that works, but everybody buys in. Nobody's out for themselves. I mean, it happens from time to time, but in general, nobody's out for themselves. And they've been very good at finding guys that you're not going to find on a 4-star sheet or a 5-star sheet, like Hunter Renfrow or Grady Jarrett, those diamond in the rough guys, and develop them, and they've turned out to be superstars.
Any thoughts on that, Grant?
Yeah, I was watching a kind of press conference of Dabo Swinney right after the early signing day period and just recently, and he said he doesn't really look at stars. He just he recruits people, and I think that's big because he wants people that are going to fit his program and fit the type of culture that he's built. So I think that's a big part of it.
All right, we got Jason Priester and Grant Matheny on the line from Shaking the Southland, the SB Nation platform for Clemson football. The Tigers and the Tide are just a couple days away from squaring off for a 4th consecutive year in the college football playoff, this time again for a national championship, and it's 1-1 as we hit part 3, but no Deshaun Watson this time. All right, would love to see and hear the predictions out of you two. I don't know how unbiased you can be, but that's fine, whether it's like this is the homer prediction, I don't care, or it's I'm trying to be as analytical and as neutral as possible. Grant, we'll start with you.
All right, I'm going to go with the neutral side of things because I think Alabama's going to actually win this game. I think Alabama, this team, is the best team that Nick Saban's ever had in Tuscaloosa. I mean, you look at just the offense is so good. Tua, Jerry Jeudy, Damian Harris, they're so good. I do think Clemson's going to hang around. They're definitely a good team as well, but I think Alabama's going to win. I think the final score will be around 35-30.
The homer in me says Clemson's going to win. The realist in me says probably not. I just don't know that the offensive line can protect Trevor good enough to give him time to hit the chunk plays down the field that they're going to need to win this game. They will hang around, but I think Alabama's going to win too. This is just the best offense Nick Saban's ever had. I'm thinking 5-6 point win for Alabama, 28-21, 28-23, something like that.
Yeah, I guess the element there is that they've incorporated this offense that looks like an Oklahoma offense when they throw the ball, but they can still beat you to death like they always have, like circa TJ Yeldon and Eddie Lacy and Mark Ingram and all those guys, like a battering ram, Derrick Henry. They still have those 4 backs and the offensive line to do that. Now, against that defensive front, that's a different deal. They may get stalemated, but they're going to beat you up front to a certain extent, just at least to keep Clemson honest in that category. And they just, where Travis Etienne's an exceptional back, I don't know that the offensive line and him alone as more of a speed guy, although he's a power guy, just the battering rams that Alabama's got in the backfield with the offensive line being able to balance the offense out with all the high-flying circus they've got downfield is just pretty devastating.
You know, they'll start you out with Damian Harris and Jacobs and just with those 2 running backs and, like you said, just beat on you with them. And then they can bring the other kid, Najee Harris, in. He's fresh. They bring him in at the end of the game. He's fresh, and he just kills you. And with those 3 receivers they got, it's an aspect of the game that we haven't seen from Alabama before this year, along with Tua. Those 3 receivers and Tua, that running game, I just think it's a little too much to overcome, especially with our offensive line against their defensive line and Quinnen Williams. I think that's just a little too much favoring on Bama's side for me.
Well, as you guys both know, in 2015, up until about 2 or 3 minutes left, you guys were right there as a heavy, pretty substantial underdog. I don't want to say heavy underdog. I think it was in the 10-point range. And the next year, it was something similar, 7 to 10 points. And, of course, you guys were able to pull it off. So who knows? The odds makers actually like you a little bit better. I think the line's down to about 5.5 or 6 points. So you certainly have a puncher's chance, or more than that.
It's down to 4.5 last night.
So some folks out there, I don't know if they know a whole lot. They're probably losing most of their money to Vegas, like most of us do. But they're certainly going with the Clemson side of keeping this at least closer than expected. Graham Athene, Jason Priester from Shaking the Southland. Please check out their work there as they prep you for the big national championship game on Monday night. Clemson and Alabama, Part 4. Guys, I appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.